Right, lads, let's talk about scrapping FA Cup replays.
Oh, man.
I think it's really, really poor, and it's a damning indictment on where football's going, especially in this country. It's a focus on the bigger teams, it's a focus on money and expediency, in my opinion.
I think it's a disgrace, to be honest with you. Obviously, as a fan of a club that's usually in European football, and usually you want less games and you don't want those replays because you feel it have an impact on your team's opportunities in other competitions. As someone that loves the FA Cup and loves those magical moments when, you know, Man United go to Exeter or, you know, go to a Yeovil, you're not going to get them, or you're going to have less possibility of those happening if you can't get replays. And also, I saw Thomas Frank, I think it was, Rory's mate at Brentford, talking about how replays were bad for him. When Brentford wouldn't have still been in existence or a Premier League club without a replay against Southampton, I think it was at a time, which made them $500,000, which meant they were much more, you know, able to carry on and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just think people getting somewhere and pulling the ladder up stinks a little bit to me. And as much as it's a nuisance sometimes to big teams, and I support a big team, I think it should definitely.
But it isn't
remain.
ever a nuisance. I really don't think it is. I think it can be framed as being a nuisance maybe for the players, but I don't know players. I'd be very interested to hear. I'd be very interested to speak to players who maybe have now retired and can speak totally openly. Did Frank Lampard find FA Cup replays annoying when he was trying to win the Champions League with Chelsea?
I don't think the player
Did Roy Keane find it annoying? Like, I don't think they would. I don't think they do find it annoying.
I think the managers are more on that, innit? You know, you hear your Klopps and not just Klopp, Pep, whoever, coming out complaining about certain things like that. And it does feel like a decision that's been made to appease 5-6
But
teams.
also, I don't necessarily think, like, you know, when Jurgen Klopp has complained about fixture issues, a lot of the time it's been born out of things that are fair enough. You know, like Liverpool do play more 12:45s on a Saturday than other teams. Like, that's a fact. The idea if Liverpool were to draw at home in an FA Cup game and have to go to a replay, I don't think Klopp would complain about that. I haven't heard him do so.
That's why we're in this situation now, because managers and clubs have complained about it and do complain about it.
No, I don't think that's what it is. I think
pushing for it.
No, the reason that we're in this situation now is because the FA are pitiful and weak, and the Premier League are trying to extract as much money as possible. And the way that they do that is to find room in their schedule for additional Champions League games.
I disagree to a certain extent. I think what the FA are doing are trying to protect the FA Cup. They have to appease these bigger clubs because they want these bigger clubs to take it seriously. And they've seen these bigger clubs say, oh, we'll go off and do the Super League and we'll go off and do that. And in order to try and protect the competition, they then ended up in a situation where they're appeasing them, but it's going to have a knock-on effect on everyone else further down the pyramid.
This isn't protecting it at all. This is making it more insignificant.
I think in their mind, they think they're protecting it because if the big clubs get unhappy with the FA Cup, eventually it will become like the League Cup, right? And they don't want it to become that. So then they're almost saying yes to everything they're demanding just to kind of hope that they still take it seriously. Do you kind of get the point I'm trying to make?
I do, but I disagree with it. I don't think that's what it is. I think what they're trying to do is condense the schedule of the FA Cup, make it more insignificant in order to allow more European games to be played, which is why the FA Cup final is now just going to be on any given Saturday. The FA Cup final is no longer in its own right. The FA Cup final will be played on a weekend, just like in that same weekend, there will be league fixtures played. And the FA Cup fixture will just be the FA Cup final will just be another fixture that weekend, which is obviously going to have an impact on the title race, because if it were this season, Manchester City will have a Premier League game where they will need the points, but they won't play that weekend. Their rivals will. That will have an impact on everything that happens in the Premier League. I think that it's only being done for the furtherance of the big clubs, and I think it's only being done for money. And it is just another example. For 25 years, I feel like the FA Cup has been given a very short shift. I think it's been given a terrible hand and has been shortchanged constantly. And I actually believe that we may be the last generation to appreciate the brilliance of the FA Cup. This will kill it, I think, which is horrific.
Does it help when you see the likes of Pep constantly trying to win it? Like, do you think that enhances?
Mate, it's always the way though. Look at the winners. You know, people don't take the FA Cup seriously, or the FA Cup isn't necessarily. And I mean, I think this is applicable to the League Cup. Apart from the final that was Portsmouth, Cardiff, wasn't it? Apart from that, it's all top teams.
Yeah, I think the big managers like Guardiola, Wenger, Ancelotti, they all understood the significance of the FA Cup. I weirdly think this is obviously what you guys have said is spot on about how the FA are handling it. I think they're really, really weak. I think this is related more to those Premier League clubs that can't quite believe they can win it. They're in the bottom 10, they're in the bottom 12 of the league, the lower halves of the league, that they don't want to have to play these extra games. And maybe the pressures come from that perspective, because I don't see a world where City having to play one extra replay here or there has any impact on if City are good enough to win the FA Cup this season or last. So I don't understand. These great managers aren't calling for it. I don't think Jurgen Klopp, you talked about Jurgen Klopp earlier, I don't think Sir Alex Ferguson would have called for a change in that regard. But I think there's this weird pressure from Premier League clubs that maybe feel pressure with their squads having to play the extra game, which I think is ridiculous.
I think there's a lot of managers that come out and complain about the fixtures, and again, this is what's taking the hit. The FA themselves say 4th, 5th and 6th round weekends will no longer be mixed with Premier League games, so it'd just be exclusively FA Cup. And they're also saying to offset the missed opportunity for earnings of smaller teams in replays, they'll be televising more games in the early rounds. But you're only going to make more money on those games if people want to watch them, and unfortunately not everyone is going to watch Barrow against...
No. And also, even if they do sell it, even if they do find, if it's on the red button, the amount of money that the teams will get for a fixture that isn't highly sought after will be far less.
Yeah.
So no, I just think, look, it's another example of the powers that be doing their best to destroy things that are precious about football, and again, fans are left in a situation that they don't want to be in. Like, never ever is any decision ever made with fans at the forefront. What do fans love? Fans love a cup tie.
Forget fans in it. If it was made with all the teams' interests at the forefront, all 92 teams or however many it is, more in the FA,
hundreds,
right? Because non-league teams can play in it as well. If you got all them to vote on it, they all want replays, apart from a select 10, 15.
Do you know what I think?
So it's really going against the majority's best interest.
I came up with a plan for this, and I know this sounds mental, but I actually think that this plan would work. If you have a situation where a game ends as a draw, I think you have to ask both managers their feelings on it, right? Because this will sort it out. What you do is you don't have this carte blanche rule that everybody has to abide by. You do it game by game, and you ask both managers. A game finishes a draw. You say to both managers, "Do you want to end this today, or do you want to replay?"
Or maybe pre-match, they get that.
Pre-match.
Because then everyone
knows what they're doing.
Excuse around that would be, well, TV can't. We don't know what our slot we need, and we don't need this, and we don't need that, and fans can't. Prepare.
Fine, pre-match. You ask the managers, are we going to have a replay if it goes to a draw, or are we not? And if both managers agree, then you end it on the day. If one manager says replay, then it's a replay.
And what doesn't help as well is when you got people like 2 Premier League teams playing at the end of May in Japan or somewhere. It's like, you're not moaning about fixture congestion. Then are you when you're making 3 million, 4 million for that game?
No.
I think the FA Cup's flawed for many other reasons. And the first one, the most important one for me, is not having a seeding system where a club like Maidstone can get far into the FA Cup and then they draw more championship sides. There has to be some sort of bonus. Now that we've done this, there has to be some sort of bonus for non-league sides or the lowest ranked side in the FA Cup at any given point getting given opportunity to go to Old Trafford.
In the tie being the home team.
No, but they might.
There's never a home and away tie.
I know when I get into seeding, people talk about, because I talked about seeding for the Champions League and stuff. I know seeding, we can get into murky territory about how we seed and stuff like that. But ultimately, when Maidstone beat Ipswich Town, which is an incredible feat, probably the best we've seen in the FA Cup this season relative to the clubs that were playing, they then got Coventry. That didn't help Maidstone.
No, but you can't help who's in the next round, can you?
But people said that, and I think playing Coventry is very similar to playing Liverpool. But you don't go to Anfield, you go to the Ricoh.
I think it's fine, the draw, and if you don't get Man United, you don't get Man United. You don't get a sort of God-given right to get Man United. But this just is another, and it's another example of the game being sold. You know what's next? I guarantee it. The Charity Shield will be being played in Florida. It's the next. That's what this is.
Yeah, that 39th game thing.
That 39th game thing happens. Chelsea play Manchester United in a Premier League game, but that game takes place in Melbourne.
I feel like for the very first time ever on the club, we're all on the same page.
Yeah, because you're a football fan. There isn't a football fan, really. There'll be some contrarian dickhead, but there isn't really a football fan that thinks that this is good news.
Yeah, true. Remember, guys, if you're in our league, The code is Club23 for the Super 6 League. Download the Super 6 app, get involved. 6 predictions could get you £250,000. But also, if you're in our league, the winner of our league every week gets a £100 classic football shirts voucher. And also, you could be, if you win the league at the end of the season, playing for the club against Pitchside at a proper ground at the end of the season with some of our, do we call them celebrity friends? Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
Influential mates.
Yeah, so get involved and keep it locked.